What's up, folks? Welcome into a special surprise edition of the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, a daily national college hoops show, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, Andy Patton, joined today by the great Zac Blackerby of Locked On Auburn, and you are joining us at the place to get your college basketball content every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time, folks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Well, big news out of Auburn on Monday, the first official day of college basketball practices beginning, and Bruce Pearl said, "That is it for me. I am out the door," announces his retirement. We're going to talk all about this decision, the timing of said decision, who is taking over for Auburn, what it might mean for this roster, especially in the transfer portal era where these guys could potentially depart. We're going to get into all of that and Bruce Pearl's legacy for the Auburn Tigers and college basketball legacy at large. But Zac, we got to start with the fact that in some ways this news felt unexpected, but also this has been talked about for a while. There had been rumors and rumblings and conversations, and Bruce Pearl had talked about this earlier in the month, that he talked about considering a run for Senate and that he might retire because of that. That is not what is happening in this case. He is retiring. He is staying with the Auburn program as an ambassador in the short term, but it still felt like it caught a lot of people off guard, especially the timing here being so close to the start of the college basketball season.
So close to the season. Yeah. And I mean, what it looks like, right, is Bruce Pearl stepping away. So Auburn needs to hire his son to be his immediate successor. I mean, that's certainly what it looks like. Is that definitely what happened? I mean, that story hasn't been told yet. As we're recording this, Stephen will talk to the media at Auburn tomorrow morning for his introductory presser. I doubt we'll get that part of the story, but I'm sure it'll be asked. But yeah, I mean, definitely a surprise. And I think most Auburn basketball fans maybe weren't aware of this. He went on John Rothstein's show, 2 weeks ago, maybe. And Rothstein said, you got 4 years left on your contract. Do you think you'll do that? And Pearl's like, no way. But I think a lot of people took that as oh, okay, he's not coaching for 4 more years, not 4 more weeks, and that's exactly obviously what happened. So we'll see how Auburn responds. It seems like they've got a plan in place with a new head coach. And I doubt there will be any sort of movement when you talk about the assistant coaches, which Bruce Pearl has been so complimentary of and kind of unique, right? With all this success that he and Auburn basketball have had, none of these guys have really left to take jobs anywhere else. It's kind of been the same core of guys, and hopefully that helps with this transition, Andy.
Yeah, I think you got to hope that that's the case here, obviously, because there's just not a lot of time to make any major changes. You mentioned Stephen Pearl. He's going to take over as the head coach. And I think one of the more kind of interesting notes about this is that not only is he taking over on what most would expect to be an interim basis. This is what we saw last year when Tony Bennett made his surprise decision to retire at Virginia. Now that was even closer to the season. That was 17 days before the start of the season. At least Bruce Pearl's a little more than a month out. But at the time, Ron Sanchez replaced Tony Bennett at Virginia, but it was kind of known to be on an interim basis. Stephen Pearl signed a 5-year deal. He is the head coach at Auburn going forward. That is the plan. Obviously, Stephen Pearl, he does not have head coaching experience. He has been at Auburn for a very long time. He played for his dad at Tennessee a while ago. He has been around the sport. He's been around a phenomenal coach and his father for a long time. But Auburn is now trusting their program, which has been built so successfully under Coach Pearl, to somebody who has not done this at the game's highest level before, and they're giving him a lengthy contract to do so. I know this is very fresh news for us, Zac, but what are your thoughts on that and kind of what that tells you about the timing of this decision for Pearl and also kind of what it means for the program going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two sides. I think the Auburn fan base is really, I guess there's 3 sides. The third is still kind of waiting to see how they actually feel about it. Cause like you said, it is fresh. It's kind of shocking to a lot of people, but I think there's 2 major trains of thought. The first one, and this is where I currently sit, Andy, is Well, Bruce Pearl built up arguably the worst program at the time in men's men SEC basketball.
Mhm.
It built it into a power. 2 Final Fours in 6 years. I mean, they were the number one team for most of the year last year, and they were excellent. When they had Jabari and Walker, when they were the number one team then too, and then obviously 5 championships over the last 8 years. I think for the Auburn Tigers. Bruce Pearl doing that at Auburn, it's crazy. It's unheard of if we would have said that a decade ago. So I'm in the camp of Bruce built this. He deserves to do whatever he wants to do next. I think that falls on him. And if he wants to give it to his son, who has been a major, major part of this, that's fine. Yeah, do it. Do it.
But I think,
yeah,
go ahead.
But then the other side, and I'm sure that's what you were about to say, is the other side of it is, well, Auburn now is a top 10, top 15 job in college basketball. When you talk about the best home court advantage in college basketball over the last few years, and in the SEC for sure, and being competitive and what's become the best conference in college basketball, and the access to NIL and all these big boosters who want to see Auburn win at basketball, you've got access to so much. You're not a massive brand like Duke or Kentucky, but you're winning, Andy. You're winning at Auburn, and they want to continue to see Auburn basketball win. And so that would be attractive to most coaches. I think most coaches would take the Auburn job. And so, why not have a national search if this happens a few months ago? Those are both sides of the argument. I'm in the former rather than the latter, but I 100% understand both sides to this.
And I think too, Stephen has an opportunity because he's going to coach what is very likely going to be the same roster, or a roster with very, very minimal changes to it, in part because of the timing of this decision. But it gives him an opportunity to actually kind of show what he can do and show what he's capable of with a staff that's going to be very similar, with a roster that may end up being exactly the same. I think that puts him in a position to succeed right away and potentially make it so that Auburn their hand is not forced and they have to start looking for a new coach a year or two from now if Coach Pearl is unable to do so. And I kind of want to talk a little bit more about what's going to happen over the next 30 days as we do have this transfer portal window opening up for Auburn. Could it cause some potential roster changes? Zac and I are going to get into all of that and more coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, you need to know that your favorite neighborhood spots, they run on Square. There are certain businesses that truly make the neighborhood feel like home, whether it's the local sports bar that is packed on game days, that coffee shop that knows your order by heart, or the corner deli that's been serving your community for decades. These are the places that bring people together. And when neighborhood businesses thrive, the whole neighborhood thrives. So what does supporting a community look like? Spending money there does not just have to support the business, it supports the people behind it and the community around it. And those local spots are what make the neighborhood feel like home. And so many of them, they run on Square. Square is a proud partner of more than 4 million neighborhood businesses around the world. You can go to square.com/go/lockedoncollege to learn more. But before you do, go support your favorite neighborhood spot. You'll be happy you did. Square. See you in the neighborhood. Today's episode is also brought to you by Game Time. Folks, college football is back in full swing, and I could not be more excited. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy that is in the stands, there is nothing like it. But let's be real, actually getting tickets to games can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout, and that's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see, folks, that's what you pay. And honestly, it's faster, it's cheaper, and it's less stressful than any other way that I have bought tickets. And I love that you can see the view from your seat right there in the app. We're talking Auburn. We're going to switch to Auburn football. They are hosting Georgia on October 11th. That is also the day they're honoring Cam Newton with a jersey retirement ceremony. As you might expect, tickets are not going to be super easy to find for that game, but you can get them on Game Time. You can get in the door for under $250 right now. And they got a super deal where there's tickets behind the Auburn bench and they're only $423. That's a phenomenal deal to see Auburn, Georgia, and Cam Newton get his jersey retired. So folks, take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets by using Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Terms apply. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. All right, folks, continuing our conversation here with the great Zac Blackerby of Locked On Auburn, reacting to the big news of the day in college basketball that Bruce Pearl is stepping down as the head coach at Auburn after a tremendous college basketball coaching career, not just at Auburn. He had multiple other stops, has been one of the most prolific coaches in the sport for a really long time. But one of the big questions, Zac, that we've talked about with Bruce Pearl, that we talked about last year with Tony Bennett on this show, that we've talked about with a few other programs, is this kind of movement of coaches leaving their posts right before the start of the season. Obviously, in this case, there's about 42 days, I think, until the first games for the college basketball season begin. And there's a transfer portal window that opens up. It'll be open officially on Tuesday for 30 days. Any player on Auburn's roster will then be able to enter the transfer portal and go to a new school. But classes have already started. Most rosters are pretty well set, if not completely set, across the country. And so you don't really expect to see a lot of potential roster movement here. I will say, as somebody who follows Gonzaga very closely, that they did land a player from Virginia last year when Tony Bennett left. That player chose to redshirt for a full year. That's likely what would happen if anybody were departing Auburn at this point. But for Auburn, since they're keeping the rest of the staff together, assumingly, since Stephen Pearl has been around the program for a very long time, it doesn't feel to me like we're likely to see much, if any, roster changes happening for this program following this news.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like these guys don't know Stephen. In fact, I've had several Auburn basketball players over the last several years, and I asked them, like, hey, what was it like as soon as you entered the portal? The first coach that called them, I think the three that I've asked that question, they all said it was Stephen Pearl that called them first. So it's not like they're unfamiliar with this. Now, did they come here to play for Bruce Pearl? Yeah, probably. So, like, let's don't act like that's not a big deal. But I bet they also came for more than that. The staff, the facilities, the fan base, the NIL. Like, Auburn is set up and positioned to succeed in basketball. And does it take a slight hit? Yeah, let's don't act like it doesn't. But I don't think it changes all of the relationships. And look, it sounds like Bruce Pearl is still going to be around. He and Auburn put together this like 16-minute video they posted on social media. Really, really well done. But towards the end of it, he talked about how, you know, he's not running for office, which is what a big talking point has been, and that Auburn has a job for him, some sort of ambassador or like maybe like a deputy AD. We don't fully know, but he did allude to that. And so he's going to be at all these athletic venues as much as he can cheering for Auburn is what he talked about. So that tells me he's going to be nearby. So if they did come for Bruce Pearl, they're still going to have Bruce Pearl nearby. I'm not expecting a ton, but look, there are some of these guys that are on this roster that, like, I don't think are going to be part of the plan this year. And so, like you mentioned, if they did come for Pearl and they feel, you know, disheartened by the news and all of that, like, would it make sense for some of them to leave? Possibly so. But if you're going to redshirt, like, I don't know, redshirt here and then see if it's a good fit or not. If you're kind of in a spot to move forward the next year, and then, you know, you use that leverage at the end of the year when the portal opens. So I don't know if it makes a ton of sense, but I mean, statistically, like, is Auburn going to bat 1,000 here? I don't know.
Yeah, and I think it's the timing obviously is advantageous for Auburn in the sense that these players, if they are weighing whether they want to stay or whether they want to go, their options in terms of leaving are far less. You're not going to have potentially 300, 350 different programs looking at you. You're going to have a small handful of programs that have roster spots that are willing to bring you on. And even if you're planning to redshirt, I still don't think there's a lot of programs that are going to be champing at the bit to bring somebody in at this point and get them acclimated and get that all sorted out. It's not a good time. I mean, it's a great time if you're Auburn. It's not a good time if you're a player right now to try to be looking for a new school. And I think that's why this timing, I mean, that's a big part of the reason for this.
And I do want to be clear here, right? Like, you're correct. You're 100% correct. But I also think you would agree that it not being good for the players also means it's not good for Auburn. I mean, in this age of college athletics where the players hold so much power, I mean, this is something that every college basketball locker room is talking about right now, much like it was with what happened to Virginia a year ago. I mean, everybody was talking about that because it's like, wow, you're kind of stuck. Like, how good is it? So, I don't think the optics of it are perfect by any stretch of the imagination. And we'll see. I mean, we'll see. And some guys gave up more than others, right? I mean, you look at some of the transfers that they added, and like, Kevin Overton was pretty highly sought after. Keyshawn Hall, Keyshawn Murphy. I mean, there were a lot of guys that were pretty coveted in the transfer portal. And then obviously the high school guys too, that are coming in. I mean, Caden Magwood is primed to be a stud. But like Tahad Pettiford could have been drafted. Like, he could be in the NBA right now, and he chose to go back to Auburn. Now, did he choose to go back to Auburn? Did he choose to play for Bruce Pearl? Like, those are conversations that I hope were had, but you're starting to see some posts kind of from some players where it doesn't seem like that was what happened. So, yeah, I mean, there are a few guys where like they gave up a lot to either come to Auburn or come back to Auburn. And I hope those guys are taken care of.
And I think that's a big kind of question that I have in this situation too. You mentioned Tahad. I think he's the one that is the most fascinating to me because it wasn't like, he was a fringe draft pick. Like, he's maybe going to get drafted. Like, he was going to get picked. He was potentially going to be a first round pick. At worst, he was probably going to be a top 40, 45 pick in that draft. There was a ton of momentum for him being a guy. I mean, he would be in the NBA right now. It's not really up for debate. He would. And he chose to come back to Auburn and to play for Bruce Pearl. And that was the decision. Like, again, there's more to it than just playing for Bruce Pearl specifically. But if he's surprised right now, if he did not expect this to happen, I would think the following emotion you would feel after that is anger. Like, I would be upset that my coach is leaving, and maybe he has a great relationship with Steven and maybe things are going to go great. But it's one of those things where if this wasn't known, and for all accounts, again, there was rumors about Pearl, but he was saying in early September that he was going to make a decision later in the month, but he wasn't planning to. Again, that was more about the Senate run, but it didn't sound like he was really committed to making this decision until somewhat recently. And if that's the case, fine. You can't, I mean, that happens. Sometimes people's hearts aren't in it and they change their mind, but it does put a pretty rough spot for these players because, again, there's not much else that they can really do. Hopefully they're bought into the system, which is probably not going to change all that much with Steven taking over. Obviously, these players are getting paid and there's no contracts, and that's a conversation for another day. But assuming that the money that they were promised is going to continue to come through, which there's no reason to think that it won't, they're still going to be compensated for their time. They're still playing for a great team in a great conference and with a great schedule. Like, none of that really changes for them. But yeah, I particularly with Tahad and with those transfers that you mentioned, Overton and the Keyshawns, Murphy and Hall, like those guys could have played a lot of different places. And you got to wonder, even if they're not quite 100% in it now because of this, that can impact this program and be an unfair burden that Steven now has to deal with.
Yeah. And I think another note, like if the plan really was, which once again, this is what it looks like. I'm not saying that it is, but it's what it looks like. Were Pearl to wait till we got to a point of no return where he could step away and they would need to name his son, Steven, the head coach for the Auburn Tigers. If you're doing all of this to help your son, you don't want to do all this and then set him up for failure.
Right.
And like, you need these guys to play for Steven. And so you got to think that Pearl's going to do everything he can to make sure these guys are happy. One, because he built a relationship with these guys, but also just because of he wants his son to win. He wants Auburn to continue to win.
Well, I think that's what makes this a bit of because we've been comparing it so much to the Virginia the situation, and obviously the situations are not exactly the same, but the comparison makes sense. But for Tony Bennett, he was trying to leave his predecessor, Ron Sanchez, the opportunity to have success at Virginia because he was his friend. And he thought, hey, if he does well this year, they may keep him on long term. it did not work at all, in part because Ron Sanchez didn't really have a great history as a head coach, and it played out that way in his year. But I also wonder, like, if the players were frustrated, if they were unhappy, if they felt like they had been hoodwinked or whatever, like they're maybe not going to play as well that season, regardless of who the head coach is. And so that's the separator here, is that Bruce Pearl isn't going anywhere. He's still here. He's still around. And I think in that way, like if Tahad is frustrated or if Murphy's frustrated or whatever, they can talk to Coach Pearl. And we know, amongst the many things that he was very good at, having those conversations and those emotional moments and heart to heart, like he is very good at that. And I think that he will have the ability, because he still cares about this program, and he's showing that by still being around the team and taking on a different leadership role at the institution. That, I think, curbs a lot of those concerns. And so, which is a good thing for Auburn, but also I think if the team doesn't do as well, it's hard to say, well, the timing made everybody feel a little bit more, emotional about it. It's going to be more of like, if the program's not doing well, it's probably because Stevens maybe not ready for the job. And I wonder if that puts even more pressure on him of like, you got to deliver in year one, because, your dad put together a pretty darn great roster and he's still here and he's still helping out. So you just got to get it done on the floor. And if this team's not doing it, I wonder if that'll kind of reflect on him more so than it might have in a different situation.
Yeah. I 100% agree, Andy. For sure.
Well, let's talk Coach Pearl's legacy overall. We've kind of talked about the situation. We've talked about the timing of it all and what it might mean for this roster. But I kind of want to talk about what he did at Auburn and the success that he had over the last decade plus. And we're going to get into that and a little bit more here coming up in just a second. But first, folks, Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride, with more IIHS top safety pick awards than anybody else as of August 2025. From footwork to breath work, athletes sweat out all the details. And Mazda brings the same intention to how they craft every make and model. You can feel that incredible Japanese craftsmanship in every detail, from the metallic accents to the available Nappa leather upholstery. With all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season, because with Mazda, everyday drives feel like anything but. From smooth handling to intuitive controls, like our players, Mazda sweats every detail, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. All right, Mr. Blackerby, let's close out this show talking about the legacy, the history, the success that Bruce Pearl had as the head coach at Auburn. It's easy to focus on the immediate, what does this mean for the program? And I think that we've covered that and had some great conversations there, but there's really no debate. Bruce Pearl is the greatest coach in Auburn basketball history, and there's an argument that he's the greatest basketball coach at pretty much every stop that he has made in his illustrious career. Tremendous run at Tennessee, tremendous run at the Division II level prior to that. Like, he was an all-out winner everywhere that he's gone. This Auburn program under Bruce Pearl, 2 Final Four runs, number 1 overall seed last year, 246 wins for Coach Pearl, which is the most in program history. Like you said, 5 combined SEC titles over the last 8 years or so. And this is a program that did not have very much basketball success prior to Bruce Pearl taking over. Very, very little. Frankly, they had one really great year in the early aughts. That's about it for this team prior to Pearl taking over. Now, as we kind of start to reflect on his journey, on his legacy, on what he meant for Auburn, kind of what are your thoughts and feelings on how impactful Coach Pearl was and will probably continue to be, even in a different role, for this program going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you would ever have an Auburn host on a national college basketball show if it wasn't
fair.
if it wasn't for Bruce Pearl. I mean, he made Auburn people care, right? I mean, I remember just growing up at Auburn, my dad would pick me up from school when I was in like middle school before I could drive. And we'd go watch Tuesday night SEC games, Wednesday night SEC games. This was at Beardy's Coliseum before they moved over to Neville, and Neville was built. But there'd be like, we just walk up and get a ticket. There'd be like, 1,000 people in this like 10 to 11,000 seat state. I mean, it was a joke. It was a joke. They were the laughing stock of the league. There was a year in like 2010, I think, where like they were the 1 seed in the NIT, and it was just like, yeah, all right, cool, this is great. I mean, he changed it. From the moment he stepped off the plane when he was hired to be Auburn's head coach, he walked halfway there. I don't know if you've seen the video, Andy. It's electric. He walks halfway there and then he just dead sprint into this, mosh pit of students and is jumping up and down with them. And it took a few years to get going, and there were glimpses of it, right? When they shocked LSU in the SEC tournament, I think his first year, it's when KT Harrell went crazy. They had moments, and then after, a few years, they figured out how to sustain it. And then they became the hottest team in college basketball in 2019 and went on to the Final Four. And then it's Auburn can win at basketball. That was before he was doing it with elite recruits, and he started getting elite guys like Jabari and Walker. He got Chuma drafted, and the rest is history. Nobody did more as far as building a college basketball program in the last, I don't know, maybe ever, honestly, Andy. What he's done has been absolutely tremendous as far as what he had to work with, and now Auburn being the top of the best conference in college basketball. It's insane. If we would have read all of these numbers that you just did 10 years ago, after his first year, we would have been like, yeah, there's no way. There's no way. That's hard to do in the college basketball video game that we used to have, let alone real life. No, Bruce Pearl's the greatest Auburn basketball coach of all time. He's one of the best basketball coaches in the history of the SEC. And he's going to, his legacy will live on for forever.
It's so fascinating to me that to see a program that, so often you'll see a coach come in and invigorate a program that didn't have a lot of history at the power conference level. This is not that uncommon, but usually, for starters, those coaches typically last less than half a decade because they move on. If you go and you all of a sudden have a bunch of success at, let's say, Boston College or something like that, you're going to go take another job. Somebody in the SEC, somebody in the Big Ten is going to come calling, and they're going to snap you up and bring you out. And then those programs tend to have these big highs, and then they fall back down. We see that it's pretty common at every level, but specifically, at kind of lower level power conference programs. And for Auburn, obviously in the SEC, this incredibly competitive conference, even before, it's been really good the last half decade or so, but even before that, it still had a ton of great teams. And I can't really remember a time when a program the switch has flipped this dramatically from, we weren't really competitive year in and year out to suddenly being one of the best teams in the entire country. That is extremely rare. And for Bruce Pearl to have done that at this program, to have, helped build, like you mentioned earlier, one of the best home court advantages in all of college basketball, I am insanely, as a much more neutral observer, I am insanely interested to see if that legacy can carry on. I mentioned I'm a neutral observer, but as I alluded to earlier, I also have my strong connection to Gonzaga, which is a very, very different program, but they went from nothing to being a national powerhouse as well. And it's people are so terrified of what happens when their coach leaves. And now we're going to see how that plays out. Now Auburn has a buttload of resources that they're going to be able to use, and they have that fan support and they have that energy around the program right now. But it'll be really interesting to see if this program can sustain losing a coach as iconic as Bruce Pearl, because frankly, there's not a lot of precedence that it can happen, but there's also not a lot of precedence for a coach to put in a decade's worth of work into a program like Auburn either.
Yeah, it's a unique spot. And look, Steven's got his hands full. But he's got a brand new roster that he's going to have to win over. That, we don't know the extent of the conversations, but I'm assuming they didn't think that they were coming to play for him. They thought it was coming to play for his dad. Right. So obviously that's going to be part of this, but also, Steven, he's done a lot of things, but he hasn't ran a program yet. That's going to be part of this. And then Auburn's non-conference slate is tough. And then, you got to play in the SEC, which somehow gets better and better every year, as you guys talk about on the show a ton. So, at some point when we get closer to the season, I'll do several shows on this one, Locked On Auburn, but what is success look like this year? Because you can't expect what just happened. You can't expect what just happened with, Janai Broome, who was, I think, the best player in college basketball last year for at least the first 80% of the season. You're not going to have that. You're not going to have that again. So we'll see. We'll see exactly what expectations are and if they adjust, but they're going to be high. They're going to be high at Auburn, and we'll see if Steven can keep that level of production where his dad had it.
Zac, thank you so much for your expertise, your insight into this program. Obviously, a tremendous success for Bruce Pearl over the last decade, and we wish him well as he continues again staying at Auburn going forward. But this is a huge story out of the SEC, out of the Auburn basketball program. I was already very excited to see this team this year, but now even more so. I'm very, very excited to see what Steven can do with this incredibly talented roster. And this kind of turmoil that hit this program here about 6 weeks before the season. Thanks again for hopping on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm gonna post this on my feed. And look, folks, y'all heard Isaac with me earlier today. That is Andy's co-host. And so if you like these guys, please give them some love every day here on Locked On College Basketball.
We appreciate it, folks. That is going to wrap it up for us today here on the Locked On College Basketball Podcast. We'll be back with a couple more team previews. We had planned to do the Duke team preview today. We're going to actually push that a couple days later with the incredible JJ Jackson of Locked On Blue Devils and Isaac and Lance Daw from Locked On Kentucky. We'll give you that Kentucky team preview as well later this week. Thanks again, folks, for listening. We appreciate every single one of you. We'll be back with more fun shows later this week. Until then, though, as always, peace out.